This is another video in my series on building blocks of all the tasks that you need to do if you want to take a raw image into Photoshop. In a previous video, I focused on Adobe Camera Raw using specifically the detail section where you looked at noise and all associated sliders on that. And in this particular one, I will look at the clarity and texture slider in the basic section of Adobe Camera Raw. The image I'm using is the same one I used to illustrate how the denoise tools in Camera Raw works, and you'll find the link for that video up here now. And I pulled the photo into Photoshop, and I want to illustrate with how to use various contrast tools in Camera Raw. Just for sake of clarity, if you normally import your RAW file via Camera Raw into Photoshop, this whole video will be part of that process. You will do directly after your denoise step as in the previous video. So for that purpose, I'm using Control or Command J on my keyboard to create a new layer for me. Then I'm going to filter right at the top, and I'm going to the Camera Raw filter. You can also use Shift plus Control or Command A to open this for you. So this is the image inside Camera Raw. Now there are three tools in Camera Raw that uses contrast. The first of all is contrast right here at the top. And if we quickly look at what happens, if we go from where it is in its default position at 0, look at the dark areas there and there at the bottom and the lights there. If we increase contrast, it makes the brights brighter and the darks darker. If we reduce this completely, it makes the lights darker and the darks brighter. So in other words, what it does, if you reduce it, it evens out the difference between brightest versus darkest over your whole image. That is critical. Okay, I'm double-click this little arrow there to reset this to a 0 level. Let us look at what happens with clarity and texture. For this purpose, I'm going to zoom in to 100%. I'm going to take clarity down to 0 to look at what happens with texture. Let us increase texture to its maximum level and to its lowest level. Now notice that there's not a noticeable change in the darkness and the lightness of the image itself as what happens with contrast. It works, it's very subtle. There's a difference, but it's very subtle. Okay, where the subtlety lies, look on a hand here, those creases there, and in this area there. If I increase it, look at exactly where it becomes lighter and darker. And you'll notice inside this crease, only there, the light areas becomes brighter and the dark areas goes darker. So in other words, it changes the shape on a very small width inside the image. Let us take this down, and you see again, so it works literally on an area the size of that. It's very small. And if you look at this wider area here, you can't see a noticeable difference of increased darkness. Okay, let's set that one. Let us look what clarity does. If I increase it, now notice that this whole area seems to become darker. So that indicates that clarity seems to have a slightly bigger footprint than the texture inside the photo. If I take this down completely to the other side, you'll see now this whole area becomes lighter here. If I leave that down, take texture up, now you can see where the difference lies. So with other, texture does exactly what it does. It works on the small bumps and valleys inside the photo in our hand on a small level, while clarity works on the slightly bigger slopes and valleys. If you look at, for instance, a cheekbone to a nose, you'll notice what the clarity does. It influences over this slightly bigger area. It is not like in that area there, it's more like, for instance, my whole hand, that area there. But this is actually quite interesting, because if we look, reset texture, if we look at pulling this over completely, we can see it introduces a lot of noise and it becomes slightly unpleasant, the photo. But let us go and see if we can reduce that. So we reduce it by taking down the texture slider. Now see what happens is that Suddenly we accentuate shape quite a lot by doing that, and we're taking the unpleasant bits away by doing that. So the combination of these two sliders specifically for portrait work is quite strong. But this might be a bit much. Let me show you why. Let us zoom out. And you'll see now it becomes almost it is less pleasant. Let me show you if I do that. Like the texture slide again. You see, it becomes to a level where it becomes almost like unpleasant. If you look at specifically what happens on the hand there, in this area here, and this area there. So it's a bit too much. So let's take it down to where it's slightly pleasant, and then take the texture slider down to smooth it out slightly. So in this way, we can actually work on shape and texture differently by understanding how these two sliders work. And by using them in a negative way, with other words, for every bit of increase on clarity, I decrease texture to counteract the negative bits that clarity brings to me. And for specifically for portraiture, this is an exceptionally strong tool to use like that. Let us see how we can apply this using the masking tool. In Camera Raw, right at the top there, you'll find the masking tool, and I'm going to use a brush. And I'm going to create a mask on the eyes and the lips and the brows, which is the detail that you normally enhance inside a face. I can even maybe just apply it to her nose area there. If I want to, I can also apply to her hair, but for now, let us stick with this. Then I'm going to zoom in. Click Z on my keyboard, click on that, and I will go to where I previously was zoomed in at 100%. Now, because what we've learned with clarity till now, we know that clarity works in a wide area, texture works in a smaller area. Because in this case, we used a mask in a small area, so intuitively, we should know that this is a texture job more than a clarity job. But let us have a look. If I scroll down inside the mask tools, and there at the bottom, we'll see under effects, there's a clarity and texture slider. So let us first of all, let us take clarity up. And what you can see what happens at the 100% level, it is just too big for what we want to do here. Let us see what will happen with texture. Increasing that, and you can see 100%, even it makes quite a pleasant and interesting effect there. If we zoom in further, let's go to 200%. And there you can see how big a difference it makes. So I'm going to leave it at 80% here. I'm going to zoom out the before and after on this. And this is the effect that you get by just using clarity and texture properly at various levels inside your portrait image. Now remember, portraiture has got rules of its own. You want to de-accentuate, especially with women's portraits. You want to soften skin, and you want to enhance detail slightly, like eyes and so on. With men, it's quite often you don't worry too much with skin softening, depends on your portrait, but with nature, flowers, macro work, etc., you work it in a different way, because there you quite often want to accentuate shape as well as the surface texture of many of the things. So for portraiture, this approach worked quite well, and I think you would agree with that. If I click OK at the bottom, I will be taken back to Photoshop, and just finally, that was my original image, and this is my final image by just using texture tools. I haven't done any sharpening at this stage. So my base, before I do any further work on my portrait, is in place now properly. And you can see that this is already a massive big improvement from what we had originally. In closing, a big thank you to ArtPix Wall Art for their help in producing these videos. Please have a look at the website. Maybe there's some of their wall art that you love to have for your personal spaces.